You're shopping at Costco with your two young kids on a perfectly normal Tuesday morning. Everything's going great, the kids are behaving, you're checking items off your list, and life is good. Then a complete stranger approaches you and asks you a question that makes you question everything you thought you knew about being a dad, a husband, and apparently, a catch? What happened next left me so confused and bewildered that I'm still trying to process it weeks later. And when I told my wife, well, let's just say her reaction was unexpected. If you've ever had one of those moments where a complete stranger made you see yourself in a completely different light, or if you've ever wondered what it's like to be unexpectedly hit on while just trying to buy bulk toilet paper, then you're going to want to stick around for this one. Hit that like button if you're ready for a story that's equal parts heartwarming, awkward, and absolutely hilarious. And don't forget to subscribe because, trust me, you won't want to miss stories like this. Just another Tuesday morning. Let me paint you a picture of who I am because context matters here. I'm 43 years old, happily married to an incredible woman, and we have 3 amazing kids together. I work a pretty standard job, nothing too exciting, but it pays the bills and keeps food on the table. My wife, on the other hand, is absolutely brilliant. She's got this career that she's passionate about, and honestly, she makes more money than I do. And you know what? I couldn't be prouder of her. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm some kind of male model or anything like that. I'm just a regular guy. Average height, maybe a little soft around the middle from too many dad dinners and not enough gym time. I've got the kind of face that blends into a crowd, not ugly, not particularly handsome, just there. The kind of guy who, in 43 years of life, has never really turned heads or had women approach him out of the blue. Which is why what happened that Tuesday morning at Costco left me so completely and utterly confused. It was one of those perfect autumn mornings where the air is crisp but not cold, and the sun is shining just enough to make everything look golden. My wife had an early meeting at work, so I volunteered to take our 2 youngest kids, our 2-year-old daughter Emma and our 4-year-old son Jake, on a Costco run. Our oldest, who's 8, was at school living his best 3rd grade life. Now, if you're a parent, you know that taking 2 small children to Costco is either going to be the best part of your day or an absolute disaster. There's really no middle ground. But that morning the kids were in fantastic moods. Emma was babbling happily in the cart, pointing at everything with wide-eyed wonder, and Jake was being my little helper, reading signs and asking a million questions about everything we passed. Dad, why do they sell tires here? This isn't a tire store. Dad, can we get the giant teddy bear? Dad, why is that pizza so big? You know how kids are, everything is fascinating, everything is a discovery. And honestly, seeing Costco through their eyes made it feel like we were exploring some kind of magical wonderland instead of just buying groceries in bulk. We started in the produce section, where Emma got excited about the massive bags of apples, and Jake insisted on helping me pick out the best bananas. Then we moved through the clothing section, where Jake tried to convince me that he absolutely needed a 3-pack of superhero shirts, and Emma grabbed at every colorful item within reach. The whole time I was just enjoying being a dad. You know those moments when you realize how lucky you are? When you look at your kids and think, man, I get to be their dad. I get to be the person they trust to take them on adventures and keep them safe and show them the world. That's exactly how I was feeling. We'd been shopping for maybe 20 minutes when I first noticed her. She was probably in her early 50s, well-dressed in that casual but put-together way that suggests she takes care of herself. Not particularly tall, with shoulder-length brown hair that was clearly professionally styled, and she was pushing her cart with the kind of purposeful efficiency that suggested she was a regular Costco shopper. At first, I didn't think much of it. Costco isn't exactly a small store, but it's not unusual to see the same people throughout your shopping trip as you weave in and out of the aisles. She seemed nice enough. When our eyes met briefly near the frozen foods, she smiled and I smiled back. Just that basic human courtesy that keeps society functioning. But then I started noticing her more often. We'd turn into the cereal aisle and she'd be there, comparing prices on granola bars. We'd head to the cleaning supplies and she'd be just ahead of us, studying the labels on laundry detergent. We'd circle back to the pharmacy section, and there she was again looking at vitamins. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't being paranoid or anything. Like I said, it's totally normal to encounter the same shoppers multiple times during a Costco trip. But what I started noticing was that she seemed to be aware of us. Not in a creepy way, but more like she was observing. Every time we crossed paths, she'd smile. Not just a polite acknowledgement smile, but something warmer. She'd look at the kids, then at me, and her whole face would light up. Jake, being the social butterfly he is, would wave at her, and she'd wave back with genuine enthusiasm. Dad, that lady is really nice, Jake whispered to me as we passed her in. Yeah, buddy, she does seem nice. and she did seem nice. There was something about her demeanor that was just pleasant. Like she was genuinely happy to be shopping, genuinely happy to see families enjoying their day. In a world where everyone's always rushing around looking stressed, she had this calm, positive energy that was actually kind of refreshing. We were in the book section. You know, that area where Costco has those massive displays of bestsellers and coffee table books that somehow always manage to catch your eye even when you definitely don't need any more books. Jake was fascinated by a book about dinosaurs, and Emma was contentedly munching on some of the sample crackers I'd grabbed for her earlier. I was crouched down next to Jake, helping him sound out some of the words in the dinosaur book, when I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up, and there she was, the woman we'd been encountering throughout the store. This time, instead of just smiling and moving on, she stopped. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was warm and genuine. "I just have to tell you what a beautiful family you have. You're the book section." "Yeah, buddy, she does seem nice." And she did seem nice. There was something about her demeanor that was just pleasant. Like she was genuinely happy to be shopping, genuinely happy to see families enjoying their day. In a world where everyone's always rushing around looking stressed, she had this calm, positive energy that was actually kind of refreshing. And you know what? I actually laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was so unexpected and sweet. Here I am, probably looking like every other tired dad in his weekend clothes, with a 2-year-old who has cracker crumbs on her face and a 4-year-old who's currently trying to climb into the shopping cart, and this woman is calling us beautiful. "Ah," I said, still chuckling, "thank you. I appreciate that." And I really did appreciate it. As a parent, you don't always get external validation for what you're doing. Most of the time, you're just trying to keep everyone alive and happy, and you're not really thinking about how it looks from the outside. But her comment made me pause and think, yeah, we are pretty great, aren't we? Jake looked up from his dinosaur book and beamed at her. "Thank you. My dad is the best dad ever." Out of the mouths of babes, right? Emma, not wanting to be left out, waved enthusiastically and said, "Hi." Hi. In that adorable way that 2-year-olds do when they're excited to meet new people. The woman's face just melted. Oh my goodness, they're absolutely precious. For a moment, I thought that was going to be the end of our interaction. A nice compliment, a sweet moment, everyone goes on with their shopping. But then she said something that shifted the entire conversation in a direction I definitely wasn't expecting. "I see you have a wedding ring," she said, and there was something in her tone that made me pay closer attention. "I hope your wife knows just how lucky she is that you're out shopping and watching your children." Now, I have to stop here for a second because this comment really struck me. And not in a bad way, in a really thoughtful way. Because here's the thing, I don't think of what I was doing as babysitting my kids or doing my wife some kind of favor. These are my children. Taking care of them, spending time with them, making sure they're fed and entertained and loved. That's not me being an exceptional husband. That's me being a parent. But I realized in that moment that maybe not everyone sees it that way. Maybe there are still people out there who think of dads as occasional helpers rather than equal partners in parenting. And maybe this woman had encountered enough men who didn't step up that seeing a dad actively engaged with his kids was noteworthy to her. "I would tell you I'm the lucky one," I replied, and I meant every word of it. "She's at work while the kids and I are goofing off so we can afford this lovely store. Because that's the truth. My wife works incredibly hard. She's passionate about her career, she's brilliant at what she does, and she makes sacrifices every day to provide for our family. The least I can do is handle the grocery shopping and give her one less thing to worry about. Plus, honestly, shopping with the kids is fun. It's not a chore or a burden. It's time I get to spend with them, watching them discover the world." The woman nodded, and I could see something in her expression that I couldn't quite read. Appreciation? Longing? I wasn't sure, but there was definitely more going on in her head than just casual conversation. And that's when things got interesting. "If you don't mind me asking," she said, and I could tell she was choosing her words carefully, "where do you and your friends socialize and spend time?" "I'm sorry?" I said, because honestly, I had no idea what she was talking about. I mean, think about it from my perspective. We've been having a perfectly normal conversation about my family, about how lucky I am to have my wife and kids, and suddenly she's asking about my social life? It felt like a complete non sequitur. But she pressed on, and what she said next made everything crystal clear. "My entire life I've had terrible luck finding quality men. Where do y'all?" Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The smiles throughout the store. The observation of how I interacted with my kids. The compliment about my wife being lucky. This wasn't just friendly conversation. This was reconnaissance. I want to be clear here. I don't think there was anything inappropriate about what she was doing. She wasn't hitting on me specifically, and she wasn't being disrespectful to my marriage. What she was doing was something much more understandable and, honestly, kind of heartbreaking. She was a woman who had been looking for a good man for a long time, and she had observed what she thought was an example of a good man in action. So she was asking essentially, where do I find more men like you? And you know what? I get it. Dating in your 50s has got to be incredibly challenging. You've probably been through relationships that didn't work out, maybe a divorce, maybe you've encountered men who weren't ready for commitment or who didn't know how to be partners. And here you are, trying to figure out where the good guys are hiding. But in that moment, standing in the Costco book section with my 2 kids looking up at me expectantly, I was completely unprepared for this conversation. Yeah, not sure, I said, and I could hear how awkward I sounded. I actually laughed. One of those nervous laughs that happens when you're trying to process something unexpected while also trying to be polite. Mostly just doing fun stuff with our families. Outdoors a ton. Even as I said it, I realized how unhelpful that answer was. She's asking for dating advice and I'm telling her about family hiking trips and weekend barbecues. But honestly, what was I supposed? The truth is, I haven't been in the dating scene for over a decade. I met my wife when we were both in our 20s and we've been together ever since. I have no idea where single men in their 40s hang out. I don't know what the dating apps are like, or what the social scene looks like for people our age. Most of my friends are also married with kids, and when we do socialize, it's usually family-oriented stuff. Backyard barbecues where the kids play while the adults catch up. Camping trips where we're more focused on setting up tents and making s'mores than on being available for romantic connections. I started walking away because the conversation had reached a point where I genuinely didn't know how to continue being helpful, and I could feel the awkwardness building. Well, nice talking with you. Take care. Need to say? You and your friends go? And that was it. She said goodbye, I said goodbye, and we went our separate ways through the store. But as I pushed my cart toward the checkout line, with Jake chattering about the dinosaur book we decided to buy and Emma happily munching on more samples, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. As we waited in the checkout line. You know how those Costco lines can be, especially on a Tuesday morning when it seems like half the town had the same idea we did? I found myself replaying the conversation in my head. First, there was the compliment about our family being beautiful. That was nice. That was the kind of thing that makes you feel good about the job you're doing as a parent. Then there was the comment about my wife being lucky. That one made me think. Because the implication was that men who actively parent their children and handle household responsibilities are somehow rare or exceptional. And maybe they are? Maybe I'm more involved than the average dad, or maybe this woman had encountered enough men who weren't pulling their weight that seeing the bare minimum looked impressive. But then there was the big question, where do quality men socialize? And that's the part that really stuck with me. Because it occurred to me that maybe the answer to her question wasn't about where to find men, but about how to recognize the right kind of man when you encounter them. Think about it, she noticed me because of how I interacted with my children. She observed that I was patient when Jake wanted to look at 17 different books. She saw that I was engaging with Emma, talking to her even though she's only 2 and can't exactly hold up her end of a conversation. She noticed that I talked about my wife with respect and appreciation. Those aren't things you can necessarily find by going to specific places. Those are character traits that show up in how a person behaves when they think no one is watching. As we loaded our bulk toilet paper and industrial-sized peanut butter into the car, I started to understand something that hadn't fully clicked during the conversation. This woman had given me a compliment that was much deeper than I'd initially realized. She wasn't just saying we looked nice or that my kids were cute. She was saying that she had observed me for the better part of an hour, watching how I interacted with my children, how I handled the normal challenges of shopping with toddlers, how I talked about my wife and my family, and her conclusion was that I was the kind of man she'd been looking for. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not telling this story to pat myself on the back or to suggest that I'm some kind of exceptional husband and father. I'm really not. I'm just a guy who loves his family and tries to do right by them. I make mistakes, I lose my patience sometimes, I'm not perfect. But maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe what she was recognizing wasn't perfection, but effort. Maybe she was seeing a man who shows up, who takes responsibility, who treats his family with kindness and respect and thinking, that's what I want in a partner. And if that's the case, then her question about where to find quality men becomes even more poignant. Because if the bar is set at shows up and treats people well, and that's still hard to find, then what does that say about the dating landscape for women her age? The drive home from Costco is usually pretty entertaining with the kids. Jake likes to narrate everything we pass, and Emma usually falls asleep in her car seat. But that day, while Jake was providing commentary on every construction site and fire truck we encountered, I found myself thinking about loneliness. Here was a woman who had approached a complete stranger in a grocery store because she was looking for hope. She was looking for evidence that good men exist and trying to figure out where to find them. And there's something both brave and heartbreaking about that. How many people are out there, feeling isolated and wondering if they're ever going to find someone who will treat them with kindness and respect? How many women have had such disappointing experiences with dating that seeing a dad patiently explain cereal options to his 4-year-old feels like discovering a unicorn? I started thinking about my single friends and realized, I don't really have any. Most of the people in my social circle are married or in long-term relationships. We met each other through work, through mutual friends, through our kids' activities. We've created this little bubble of coupled-up families, and it occurred to me that maybe that's part of the problem. If you're a single woman in your 50s, and all the men you encounter are already married or in committed relationships, then where exactly are you supposed to meet someone? The apps? Bars? Neither of those options sound particularly appealing for someone looking for a serious, committed relationship. By the time we got home, the kids were ready for lunch and Emma was definitely ready for a nap. Jake wanted to show his mom the dinosaur book the second she got home from work, and Emma was doing that thing toddlers do where they're simultaneously exhausted and wired. My wife got home around 6, looking tired but happy. She's got one of those faces that lights up when she sees the kids. And even after a long day at work, she always makes time to hear about their adventures. How was Costco? She asked while giving hugs and reviewing the dinosaur book situation. Well, I said, it was interesting. I think I might have been hit on. She looked at me with this expression that was equal parts amusement and skepticism. You? Hit on? At Costco? I know, right? I'm as surprised as you are. So I told her the whole story. The woman observing us throughout the store, the compliment about our family, the comment about her being lucky, and then the big question about where quality men socialize. And you know what my wife did? She burst out laughing. Oh my God, she said, still giggling, you're a potential cougar target. You're a cub. Leave it to my wife to find the humor in the situation. But after she stopped laughing, she got more thoughtful. You know what? She said. I actually think that's really sweet. And kind of sad. Sweet how? Sweet that she recognized what a good dad and husband you are. Sweet that she had the courage to approach you and ask for advice. But sad that she's obviously been looking for a long time and having trouble finding someone decent. And that's when it hit me that my wife's reaction was probably the most mature and compassionate response possible. She didn't feel threatened or jealous. She felt empathy for a woman who was struggling to find what we have. What this says about modern dating. That evening, after the kids were in bed and my wife and I were having our usual end-of-day conversation on the couch, we kept coming back to the Costco encounter. Do you think she was right? My wife asked. About men like you being hard to find? It's a question I've been thinking about ever since. Because on one hand, I don't think I'm particularly special. I'm just a guy who loves his family and tries to be a good husband and father. But on the other hand, maybe that's exactly what makes it significant. If basic decency and active parenting are remarkable enough to prompt a stranger to approach you in a grocery store, then maybe there's a problem with the dating pool for women of a certain age. I think about the divorced dads I know, and I have to admit that not all of them are as involved with their kids as they could be. Some of them treat their custody time like babysitting rather than parenting. Some of them are more focused on dating and starting over than on being present for the children they already have. And then I think about the never-married men in their 40s and 50s, and I wonder what their stories are. Are they commitment phobic? Are they still looking for something that doesn't exist? Are they just so set in their ways that they can't imagine sharing their lives with someone else? I don't know the answers to these questions, but I do know that somewhere out there is a woman who spent her Tuesday morning at Costco hoping to find a clue about where to find a good man, and that breaks my heart a little bit. In the days and weeks that followed, I found myself paying more attention to the interactions I had with other parents, other husbands, other families, and I started noticing things I hadn't really thought about before. At Jake's soccer practice, I noticed how many moms were there compared to dads. At Emma's library story time, I was usually one of maybe 2 fathers in a room full of mothers. At the grocery store, I started paying attention to family dynamics and realized that I do see a lot of moms shopping with kids, but not as many dads. Now, I'm not saying this to criticize anyone or to suggest that there's only one right way to divide family responsibilities. Every family has to figure out what works for them. But I started wondering if maybe, just maybe, the woman at Costco had a point about men like me being harder to find than they should be. And that made me think about my own marriage and how we've navigated the division of labor. My wife and I have always been pretty equal partners, but we've also been intentional about it. We've had conversations about who does what, and we've adjusted as our circumstances have changed. When she got the promotion that meant longer hours, I stepped up more at home. When I was between jobs a few years ago, I took on more of the household management. It's not that we're perfect, but we're trying to be fair to each other and to put our family first. Maybe that's what the woman at Costco was recognizing. Not perfection, but partnership. The uncomfortable truth. Dating after 40. As I've reflected on this experience, I've started asking questions that I never really had to consider before. What is dating like for people in their 40s and 50s? What are the challenges that someone like the woman at Costco faces when she's looking for a serious relationship? I imagine it's complicated. You're probably carrying some baggage from previous relationships. You might have kids from a previous marriage, which adds a whole other layer of complexity. You've probably developed habits and routines that you're comfortable with, and finding someone who fits into that life, or who you're willing to adjust that life for, is challenging. And then there's the question of where to meet people. When you're in your 20s, you meet people at work, at parties, through friends and classes. But when you're in your 40s and 50s, your social circle is probably pretty established. You're not going to clubs or bars. You're not in college or starting your career. So where do you go? Online dating? I've heard mixed things about that experience, especially for women. Church? Great if you're religious, but not helpful if you're not. Hobby groups? Maybe, but there's no guarantee you'll find someone compatible. It occurred to me that maybe the woman at Costco was onto something. Maybe grocery stores and family-friendly places are actually great places to observe potential partners, because you get to see how they behave in real-world situations. You get to see how they treat service workers, how they interact with their children, how they handle stress. But even if that's true, it doesn't solve the problem of how to make a connection without being inappropriate or presumptuous. I've talked to my wife about this extensively, and she's given me some insight into what women might be looking for in a partner at this stage of life. I think what she saw, my wife said, was a man who's comfortable with himself and his role in his family. You weren't trying to impress anyone or put on a show. You were just being a dad and a husband, and that's attractive. She went on to explain that in her experience, a lot of men struggle with the transition from being single and independent to being part of a family unit. They either become overly dependent on their partner to manage everything, or they resist the compromises that come with sharing your life with someone else. But you, she said, you seem genuinely happy to be doing dad stuff and husband stuff. You're not doing it because you have to, you're doing it because you want to. And that's probably what she picked up on. I think there's something to that. I am happy doing dad stuff and husband stuff. I like grocery shopping with the kids. I like being involved in their daily lives. I like supporting my wife's career and being a true partner in our marriage. But apparently that's not as common as I thought it was. This whole experience has made me think about how gender roles and expectations have changed over the past few decades and how that might be affecting dating for people in their 40s and 50s. My generation grew up in a time when traditional gender roles were being questioned and redefined. We were told that women could have careers and that men should be more involved in child rearing. We were encouraged to be equal partners in our relationships. But I wonder if that message reached everyone or if it reached everyone equally. Maybe there are still a lot of men out there who expect their partners to handle the majority of domestic responsibilities, even if both partners work outside the home. And maybe there are women who have been in relationships like that, who have been the default parent and household manager, and who are now looking for something different. Maybe they're looking for true partnership and they're having trouble finding it. If that's the case, then the woman at Costco might have been recognizing something that she hadn't experienced before. A man who seemed to genuinely enjoy being an active, engaged parent and partner. I have to admit, there was something profoundly validating about the encounter at Costco. As a parent, you don't always get external recognition for the work you're doing. Most of the time, you're just trying to keep everyone fed and happy and safe, and you're not thinking about how it looks from the outside. But having a stranger observe me for an hour and conclude that I was doing something right, that felt really good. It made me feel seen and appreciated and I think that's part of what made the interaction so memorable. It wasn't just that a woman had approached me, though in 43 years of life, that had never happened before. It was that she had recognized something in me that I value about myself but don't always feel confident about. Being a good dad and husband is important to me. It's probably the thing I'm most proud of in my life. But it's also something I worry about constantly. Am I doing enough? Am I being patient enough? Am I setting a good example for my kids? Way that I hadn't expected. So having someone observe me in action and conclude that I was the kind of man she'd been looking for, That was a pretty incredible compliment. How it changed my behavior. In the weeks since the Costco encounter, I found myself being more intentional about how I interact with my family in public. Not because I'm trying to impress anyone, but because I realize that people are watching and that my behavior might be influencing their perceptions of fathers and husbands in general. If there are women out there who are struggling to find good men, and if my public behavior can serve as evidence that good men exist, then maybe I have a responsibility to be that evidence. I've started making eye contact and saying hello to other parents at the playground. I've started being more patient and demonstrative with my kids when we're out in public. I've started talking about my wife with even more obvious appreciation and respect. Not because I want to be hit on again, honestly that was awkward enough the first time, but because I want other people to see that happy, engaged, committed fathers and husbands exist. And maybe, just maybe, if more men behave this way in public, it would be easier for women like the one at Costco to find what they're looking for. This experience has made me think more deeply about what makes someone a good partner and whether those qualities are as rare as the woman at Costco seemed to think they were. I think the qualities she was responding to were pretty basic. Patience, kindness, respect, engagement, and commitment. I was being patient with my kids, kind to strangers, respectful when I talked about my wife, engaged with my family, and obviously committed to my marriage. Those aren't superhuman qualities. They're not particularly difficult to cultivate. They're just a matter of choosing to show up and be present and treat people well. But maybe that's exactly what makes them significant. Maybe the problem isn't that these qualities are hard to develop, but that not everyone chooses to develop them. And maybe that's what the woman at Costco was recognizing. Not that I'm exceptional, but that I'm making choices that not everyone makes. I've been married for over a decade, and in that time, I've sometimes taken for granted what my wife and I have built together. You get comfortable, you get into routines, and you stop thinking about your relationship as something special and start thinking about it as just normal. But the encounter at Costco reminded me that what we have isn't normal for everyone. The partnership we've built, the way we support each other, the way we parent together, apparently that's noteworthy enough to prompt a stranger to approach me and ask for advice. It made me appreciate my wife more, and it made me appreciate the work we've both put into our marriage. It's not just luck that we have a good relationship. It's the result of intentional choices we've made over and over again.